what are they thinking? Why would they do something like that? Wouldn't it be nice to know what's going on the inside of someone's head and understand just why they do the things that drive you crazy? You're in luck. Welcome to my series on how to get along with people based on their Enneagram type, my favorite personality test that is so incredibly spot on. It's going to blow your mind. Today, my best friend Alanna joins me again to share what goes on in the mind of an Enneagram 7. I know, who let two sevens be best friends? Alanna is a Clemson Tiger and a world traveler. She loves SoulCycle and Solid Core and is currently in their program to become an instructor. Ready to dive into the mind of an enthusiast? Check it out. My beloved Enneagram 7 and my beloved best friend. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited that we get to do this together. You're back on my show. You've been on a couple times. And I feel like this is such a special episode for us because we're two best friends and two Enneagram 7s. And whoever let us out in the world together, I mean, bad
They've let us out a
idea,
couple
right?
times. Yeah. No, it's a great idea.
You know what they say though? They say sevens always find each other.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's because typically we're the most fun people in the room.
Well, the truth is not a lie.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest qualities about being an Enneagram 7 is being the classic, fun person in the room. What's your experience been with that?
Oh my gosh. I went to a birthday party last night, okay? And I knew almost everybody there, with the exception of one person who ended up being the manager of the dancer. There was a dancer at this party, okay? But I knew like all these people, like my childhood best friend was there at like one of my high school like best friends parties. And then this girl that I was on swim team with, it's like I find that I just have friends from all over or know people from all over different walks. And then they all seem to collide somehow at some place. So it's cool because you're in this experience of being able to, I don't know, have such a big network of people that you know.
Yeah. And that's a fun thing for a 7. We'll get into that. I want to get into like why and how that actually can be detrimental. But let's talk about the fun part first, because that's what 7s like to do. Let's talk about the fun part. Why is
we can just skip the fun part.
Right, we'll just skip that part. That would be so 7 of us to focus on just the fun part. That would be like how to get along with a 7. Okay, just talk about the fun parts. Got it.
Yeah. We're not talking about feelings. We're not talking about like things that hurt us. We're not talking about bad experiences. We're just talking about the fun,
just the good
and the
stuff.
excitement.
It's that one meme with the dog, the cartoon, and like the house is on fire. He's like, everything's fine. I'm fine.
Everything's fine. Yeah,
everything's fine. Everything's great. But let's talk about actually the great part about being a 7 and having that big network of people. Why do you like having so many friends? Which typically 7s do have so many friends.
So I would say that 7s, like one of our fears is FOMO. And so with such a big network of all these different friends, everybody has always got something different going on. So you usually have options. I love an option.
Ooh, options
and then
are good.
I always have something to do. And I can't really relate to those people who like just want their downtime and just want to be by themselves, or, every now and then that's good. But for the most part, I want to be able to have an option. I want to be invited, and then I want to be able to say no if it's not something that I want to do. But include, like you're included.
Right. Yeah, it feels good. Yeah, FOMO is real. So if anyone is a friend with a 7, just know that we experience deep FOMO, and when we want to be invited. However, it can be hard for us to say no sometimes. So you have this big circle of friends, you have this big network, there's always something to do. And the 7 does not like to be trapped, right? We like to have a lot of freedom. So it's nice to have a big network of people like, oh, I can pick this, I can pick this, I can pick this. But talk to me about when you overcommit to too many things. Is it easy for you to do? How often do you find yourself doing that? Committing to too many things?
I feel like it forces me into our one state. So then I have to go, make a list. What's my priority? Where do I have to be? And then what are my options? And then if you overcommit and you just can't make it happen, that's where you have to have the hard conversations. And we don't like that.
I don't like hard
So
conversations.
it adds a little bit of stress for sure.
Yeah, that stress integration into that Enneagram one, which is very like, oh my God, I have to figure this out. I can't move forward. That what is it? Paralysis by analysis. I have to analyze everything, state. Have you ever tried to accommodate everybody's plans and try to squeeze everything in?
I definitely try to do it. And then, I do get some of that little concern about hurting somebody's feelings, but I think our priority is definitely just making it to all of the events or whatever the need is.
And what can happen is, and I know in my experience as a 7, it's been, I used to, when I moved from Pennsylvania to Texas, anytime I would go back to Pennsylvania, I had this big network of friends, because FOMO led me there. And we're just friendly, right? We like to know things about people, and we'll get to that in a bit too. But I would be like, okay, friend, I can spend 1 hour with you here from 9 to 10. I'm going to spend time with you. And then from like 10 to 11, I'm going to spend time with you. And then like from 11 to 1, I'm going to be here. And then I'm driving all over trying to accommodate everybody.
Right.
At 1, I was always late. So if you're friends with a 7, they actually don't like being late. They actually hate it. But they don't hate it. But I'm going to say this to you. You don't have a problem with being late. You have a problem with saying no. What speaks to you if I say that?
I mean, I don't, I want to do all the things. I don't want to miss out. I do not like being late though. So it makes it like, here comes that like needing to get on that schedule and make sure I have time to get from here to here. And then it just gets stressful, So it's awesome to have all that different plans and have something else going on and have friends all over the world. But then, when in October, I couldn't come to Costa Rica, and that was really hard. I had the
FOMO, especially with all the pictures, and you see it's like, oh, I just want to be there, and because you feel trapped in your own circumstance, right?
Right. It's like I made this decision, I made this commitment, and now I can't do this other thing.
What does that feel like when you do miss out?
I feel like that's the ugly side of being a 7 because it lets the jealousy creep in. So you're like, well, that person gets to do this, or why can't I do all of the things? And that for me is just a nasty feeling. I don't like feeling like that. But it's definitely important to like rein yourself in, take a step back and be like, okay, it's okay. Everything's going to be fine. But initially it's like, why can't I do that?
I know it's funny that you say it in that way because I read this thing on an Enneagram thing one time. It was like relating the Enneagram to the 7 deadly sins and or something like that. And it was 7 was related to gluttony because we want to do more. So talk to me about what that more like more will make me happy. Like more time with friends, more social events, more of
travel, everything. More energy,
more passion.
More passion.
Also, 7s can go on to tangents and easily get distracted. So lots of pretty bird and squirrel in this podcast. And that is just, don't worry, we're always going to get back to the original conversation. But if you are in a conversation with a 7 and they go off on a tangent, that is just how their mind works. So
I do want to say something about that tangent because I have.
So now we're going to go further in the tangent. We will come back, but follow.
I have had people tell me that I'm rude or not listening to them or whatever, but has nothing to do with being rude or not interested in what they have to say. It's just that they say something that triggers me to get excited about something else.
Yeah.
And that's a really crappy feeling too, when somebody thinks or accuses you of being rude and you're not.
Yeah.
Like, that's not
Like,
the
no, I'm
intention at
excited
all.
for you. I'm adding to this conversation. Oh, and you think
Yeah,
I'm taking away from it.
right.
Yeah.
And that is like a really hard part about being how we are.
Mhm.
um, and now I forget what we were originally talking about.
We'll go back. I'll
Overcommitting.
remember. But so another thing, uh, going along that line, but we'll go further into this tangent before we go back. Um,
Sorry.
no, I can follow. Hopefully, all the listeners can follow. We will come back.
Hey,
I promise.
listener.
We will go back. But honestly, this is how you get along with the Enneagram 7. You entertain their train of thoughts. Um, I know for me, it's just because we get so excited about the conversation. And oftentimes, because we're in that thinking triad, our mind often is in the future. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking like already 2 steps ahead. So I get
Right.
excited about what, what is about to come in the conversation. It's not there yet.
Yeah.
So I actually find myself interrupting a lot. And that was a
Yes, me
conscious
too.
thing that, yeah, like right there. No, I'm kidding.
Thought
um,
we were having a conversation.
right? That's what it feels like, right? That was a trap. Good job. You answered that exactly like an Enneagram 7. I just thought it was a conversation. I'm excited. And I'm pretty sure anybody who listens to this podcast is probably like, yeah, you interrupt your guests a lot. It's like you get so excited. So tell me about like what that excitement feels like for you. Like, I just thought it was a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I remember being like this as a kid in school. Like, I always was like, oh, I have something to add. And then, you get to that point where you're like raising your hand and you're holding it up with the other one. And then you forget. And then you're like sad about forgetting what you were going to add to that conversation. I mean, last night too, I was like, and these other two people were having a conversation. I just really wanted to add my point and
FOMO. I'm
never
missing
got
out on this
to.
conversation.
Yeah. It's like, it's the weirdest feeling because there is like such a high from, being able to contribute or adding something to a conversation or something you just get excited about. Like, I feel like we have a high level of excitement to be able to add something into somebody else's life. To make them see that like shimmery, sparkly cloud that's floating up above us.
Right. We love that. Oh, let's go back to that.
And
I love
then
a
when
good
like
silver lining.
it's like glittery and gold, let's be honest.
For
But
sure.
like when somebody else like doesn't let us get that in, we feel like left out or like we're not able to contribute to the conversation or yeah, it's just kind of like that's like our little hurt that I feel is like our little dagger.
Yeah. And if you know, because our minds are so squirrel, pretty bird, oh, now I'm thinking about something else that just triggered another thought based off of the next sentence that you said. I forgot my original thought because that's our mind kind of just immediately goes somewhere else. And it's like,
Right.
oh, if I don't interject and say this now, if I don't change the conversation right now, I'm going to forget it.
Yeah. And that's like scary.
And maybe that's why sevens always find each other, because it's like, you know how the things that you do yourself, when somebody else does them to you, they don't annoy you because
Right.
like when people interrupt me, I don't get annoyed because I
Right.
constantly interrupt other people and I say, oh, this is just how they're conversing. So maybe that's why sevens always find each other, because we can communicate in tangent central and be interrupted and not have someone be like, oh, you cut me off,
I'm thinking two thoughts right now because, of course, my mind is already jumping to the next thing. So one of them has to do with when I'm with other friends and like understanding the Enneagram, knowing your friend's Enneagram
Mm-hmm.
really helps you understand that communication. So if somebody understands that I'm a 7 and I'm just getting excited about something, like it's not intentional. I'm not trying to interrupt you. But I have some friends that are 2s and they're always like, okay, thank you. Now let's go back to so-and-so's conversation. And it's like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. And honestly, that adds a lot into a friendship because you have that like understanding about like why somebody acts the way they do and how they treat you that way. And I hope
Right.
that my understanding, I hope that they have that as well so they can reciprocate that I'm not being rude. But then like the
Mhm.
other thought that I had was when you and I are together, it's just like it's nice because we're usually together for multiple days at a time, but then like one of us will interrupt the other one and we'll go off on this tangent, and then a couple days later I'll be like, oh my god, I think I was trying to tell you.
So in a conversation, um, if I'm interrupting you, just know I'm excited. It's not because I'm trying to cut you off. I have all intentions of coming back to it,
Yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
like I'm just so excited for you, and that's something that can be very off-putting to people because we can come in and bulldoze the conversation. And also a thing with sevens is because, typically we like to acknowledge the fun parts, the exciting parts, all the basically the emotions on the positive side of the scale, right? The eternal
Mm-hmm.
optimism. And we'll get into avoiding negative feelings later, but we don't like awkward silences. So talk to
Oh.
me about how you fill the gaps.
Oh my god, it's really funny because I yeah, awkward silences, it's taken me a long time to appreciate that it's okay to like have some quiet more than when you're asleep. um, but now I've started solid core coach training and I have to talk for 50 minutes. And you would think it would be so much easier to fill some of those spaces. And instead, it's like, oh, so strong. Great job. It's so
What do I say?
hard.
Even though that's a natural neck for you, right?
Yeah,
You would think it would
exactly.
come naturally, but it's like, oh wait, but now you're probably overthinking it, and it's like, wait, now what do I say? You know,
Right. If I
um,
could just tell them a story, I mean, it'd be fine. And the other day I
yeah,
fell while I was coaching, and that added a lot of space filling because
right,
they
because you get
laughed
to
at
talk
me.
about a lot of things.
I made them laugh, and that felt good, even though I was the one falling. It's fine.
Yeah, see, I
Um,
mean, I think as sevens we do like to be like that entertainer too. It's
yeah.
like I just want to keep it light, keep it positive. Um,
Ask you questions, tell you something funny.
mhm.
Yeah, never like just I mean, yeah, because sometimes if it's just silent and you're just like looking at the other person or like not making eye contact, it's like, okay, what do we do now?
It's awkward,
What's
and the
next?
core,
What's next?
yeah, it's awkward because in that moment of the present moment it's like, oh my god, what is next, and this is awkward, but that can also come across as you're not giving me any space to talk, especially if you're conversing with an Enneagram 9 who typically takes a couple seconds to collect a thought. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't give that space, it can, we can just dominate the conversation and people are like, man, I didn't get a word in with this person.
Right. And then I feel like we realize that at the end of a conversation.
And then you feel bad.
And then you feel bad. Yeah. We do have feelings.
Yes, we do. And it's not all, sunshine and rainbows. It's something that we cover up, right? What's hard about being an Enneagram 7 is like we do have feelings. It's not all about that optimism. You said, yeah, you like your external optimism, but it can often basically, cover up these feelings of sadness or loneliness or hurt. So,
Right.
talk to me about what that optimism looks like on the external versus what's going on the inside.
Yeah. I mean, so we always are trying to do fun things, make the best of a situation, be happy for other people, celebrate them, celebrate life, right? But sometimes, like when it seems like things are going well for other people and maybe not as well for you, people just assume that you're happy or assume that you're like, it's all good. And I feel like we kind of bottle that up and then all of a sudden it just comes out one day. And it's like, you don't understand. Like, I'm lonely or I've been dealing with X, Y, and Z, like something that we don't want to talk about typically, but then it just comes out.
So, talk to me about wanting to avoid those negative feelings. You pretend everything's okay on the outside. Like, no, like I'm the fun friend. I'm the eternal optimist. Like everything's fine, right? Going back to our favorite meme, like everything's fine. But you still have these negative feelings. And just because sevens typically want to avoid them does not mean they go away. So you push them down, push them down, push them down, and eventually they have to come out. So what does that process typically look like for you?
It comes out as like, I want to crawl in a hole. Like so we always want to be doing something, right? I like when I get quiet and I back away, that's when the negative is there, right? Like that's when I'm upset. You're not going to hear from me. Or like, I'll be quiet, like 1-word answers. Mm-hmm. It's kind of passive aggressive, but it doesn't take long. Then I come back, like give me a few minutes and then I'll be back, but otherwise it's heavy. It's like, it weighs like very heavy on us, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. We naturally just do not like to deal with those negative emotions. Sevens are in something called, it's a harmonic group. It's the positive outlook group. It's like we have a positive outlook for everything. So talk to me about what it feels like if somebody, you have this like idea and you're so excited about it. We love being excited. We love the beginning creative part, even if it never comes to fruition. Like that's our fun part right there. And somebody comes like, this is a terrible idea. It's never going to work. How do you take that?
Whoa.
Yeah. What?
Excuse me for living. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I'm just not going to tell you about I'm not going to tell you about what I'm interested in or what my idea is or anything like that. Something you said too, though, about feeling like negative emotions. Do you feel like you get over like something negatively pretty quickly? Like you just kind of like, you're there and then you swish it to the side and then it's like, okay, maybe you haven't totally cleaned it out, but you kind of just, we like to get over things quickly so we can go back to those highs.
Right. Yeah, for sure. we don't let a lot of things bother us too.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I want to just be up on this cloud. It's better up here.
Right. I feel like it's interesting in a work context or like, I managed this guy who was like, my wife's having an emotional day. And I'm just like, what? I don't get it.
Get over it. Get back on the happy cloud.
Yeah. Like just a couple weeks ago, last week, you were with me and I was like in my emotions because I thought my dog was dying. And then I was like, oh, she's not. And I'm like, okay, this is great. Let's go do the fun things.
Rosé or champagne?
Let's get drunk.
Both. Going back to the original tangent, more. Both.
Yeah.
We'll get
all of it.
Yeah. Well, and that can be, with wanting to be back on that happy cloud. One thing that I used to do a lot is someone would express a problem to me, and sevens, we love to fix things because ultimately I do want to avoid a confrontation because a confrontation to me is being trapped in pain, which is my core fear. So if somebody presents a problem to me, I thought the best thing to do is, well, let me just get them back up on this high, happy, glittery cloud, right? That'll make them feel better because it makes me feel better.
Right.
So I would actually find myself dismissing other people's negative emotions because I didn't want to deal with it. And I would be like, well, at least this didn't happen. Or like, well, at least this. Well, at least, this good part happened. And what I realized I was doing was completely lacking empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. I have been texting somebody and they told me they got bad news about a family member. And my immediate thought was, how can I get you back up on this cloud? Like, think about the good things. Like, can you do anything about this? No, you can't do anything about it. So what can we think about the positive outcomes? Are we going to focus on the negative or focus on the positive?
Yeah. It's interesting because, especially as a law of attraction coach, manifesting is all about positive energy. However, this could be actually a growth point for a 7 because there's this fine line between, everything is awesome. No, like, I just want to get you back up to this high, glittery, happy cloud. That doesn't actually mean that the negative feeling went away, right?
Right.
Just because you avoid it doesn't
Right.
mean it goes away. So you actually,
Right.
I read this thing on Instagram the other day. It said something about like avoiding difficult conversations doesn't keep the peace. It actually
Yeah,
keeps the tension,
for sure.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't mean just because you avoid it, it goes away. It actually means you hold it longer. And the longer you hold it, the thicker it gets, right? So
Hmm.
a growth point for a 7 is to come down and empathize and say, because yeah, there's negative emotions, but compassion is actually very high vibe.
Hmm.
So having compassion for somebody and saying,
Yeah.
wow, that sounds really hard. And that's a
Right.
growth point for a 7 because it's like, no, I just want to like, you'll feel better if you're on this glittery cloud because everybody
Yeah.
loves like avoiding hard emotions, but actually
Well,
validating someone's feelings is super helpful.
yeah. Yeah. So I think it was more, it wasn't like I was like, okay, let's take you out of here. But it was like, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
sorry you're dealing with this. Can you do anything about it right now?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. So are there possibilities that he could be okay?
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably case by case. You have to gauge it, you know?
Yeah.
But one thing I realized that I had done as an Enneagram 7 is because we like to fix things, because if I fix it now, I won't have to deal with a confrontation later because my mind's in the future because I'm in this thinking triad. So now I'm
Hmm.
fixing things that don't actually even exist yet, you know? And
Hmm.
I used to find myself doing that often. And a friend of mine was like, stop doing that. That's hurtful. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm fixing all these problems. And she's like, they don't
Yeah.
even exist yet. You're like creating the problem. And I'm like,
You're fixed and you're
oh,
fixed.
yeah, everybody gets fixed, you know?
Everybody's fixed.
Right. And because it's like, if everyone's fixed, if I fix it now, then I won't have to deal with the real problem when
Yeah.
if it comes up later, which is
Yeah.
actually thinking about, technically speaking, from the law of attraction standpoint, it's actually creating a negative outcome because you're focused on the negative potential that could happen that hasn't yet, you know?
Yeah. And I think going back into like our empathy and conversations and like recognizing that not every, some people feel their feelings and that's the way they go. Coming back around the next day and following up with somebody, oh my God, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Just asking that question can go really far. But
Yeah.
like, once again, it's not something that we're like not trying to ask or not thinking about. We're just a million miles ahead thinking about other things. So
So
people should know that about us. We care.
yes,
We care a lot.
yeah, we do have deep feelings. Oftentimes they're not communicated. So
Hmm.
it, because there's just, I described my brain once as a crumbled up piece of paper with like scribbles written on it, and you have to like that, those are my thoughts, and I have to like uncrumple the piece of paper and then decode all the scribbles, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking. So
Because it's like this plane of this paper has one message on it, and then on the other side that's another. So like when you flatten it out, it doesn't make any sense, but it's there.
right. And like there's just so much going on that I know I am not as thoughtful as I would like to be. It doesn't mean that I don't care. I'm always like,
Mhm.
man, I wish I was more thoughtful, but I just forget to be thoughtful. So yeah, it's just I think that's a big growth point for 7s is to like come down. It's okay if you don't, you know, you don't have to fix things right away. Just be there,
Oh,
be
yeah, I'm gonna
empathetic.
text that person really quickly. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Oh, right. Squirrel. I have to do this right now or else I'm going to forget. Right. Which goes on to what you said you liked about being an Enneagram 7, which is that spontaneous and free spirited, because this goes back to my original tangent of that more
Yeah.
will make me happy. And so it can always seem like we're not satisfied with what we have because,
Hmm.
but I want more. If this much makes me happy, oh my God, I can be even happier if I had more of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people who are in relationships with 7s are like, are you never happy? Am I not good enough? Because you always
Right.
seem to want more. But talk to me about how it has more to do with you and not the other person or a situation.
But I do like it is like we're at a party, we have a glass of wine. I'm only going to have 2 glasses of wine, but I'm having fun and I want more. Like, it's like everything. More shoes. Let me tell you, more shoes do not make you happier, especially when you're going to move.
More shoes means more credit card bill. The downside. Oh, we have to think of the downside too. Oh, I don't want to think about that. Well, and that can be, irritating for people too, because it's like, hey, you said you were going to be here at 9, or you said we would only stay for an hour, especially if you're with somebody who's introverted. It's like, okay, I'm going to put up with this for an hour. But in the moment, you're like, but I was having so much fun. I don't want to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to understand. I mean, it's hard for that person who's introverted to see our perspective. But like, for me, it's like, how could you be any other way? And then even if it's something that you're like, I don't want to go do this, then we always end up having fun. We always end up like, there's always the positive side, the happy side, the fun side of whatever it is that we're doing. Like, I used to have to network all the time for work. And every single time I was like, I don't want to go. And then every time I got there and I had a lot of fun and I was like, I'm really glad I did that. It was great. Yeah. Found somebody I knew, did something fun. And so we do have like low energy points, I would say, but
I think that comes from saying yes to so many things,
Yeah.
So I think if someone's in a relationship or friendship with a Enneagram 7 saying, hey, babe, like, you don't have to do all the things. Like, what can you say no to today?
Right.
Oh, wow. I live by my Google Calendar because squirrel. And I will look at a day sometimes and be like, oh my God, I scheduled way too much. But in the time I scheduled it, I was like, of course I can do more. And I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be a really long day.
Yeah. But that also like makes me feel like I'm getting more done when I have like stacked days, Like, oh man, I am going to be so productive. I'm going to get all this stuff done. This is how people live.
Yes. And then it ends up being, if you do that too much, it's like burnout, right? Because more and more and more and more and more, a growth point for an Enneagram 7 is, sometimes there can be too much of a good thing. What solid piece of advice would you give to an Enneagram 7 who is maybe, a super 7 and isn't aware of these growth points yet? What advice would you have for them in terms of a relationship with another person?
I mean, communication is always going to be key in any relationship, whether you're a 7 or not. But communicating those hard feelings, having the hard conversations is going to be the most important thing you do. Because you're not going to be on the same page. They're not going to understand where you're coming from. Or like maybe that's an easy conversation for that person, but you just avoid it. Get it out there. It's worth it. Yeah. And honestly, you'll get to figure out if this friendship or relationship is worth your time because you have a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things that you want to do. Don't waste time with a situation that's not going to be healthy for you. That's just advice. Because there's something to do.
Yes, that's super solid advice for an Enneagram 7 because get those negative feelings out of the way, have that difficult conversation, and you no longer have to dread it because staying in dread is actually a negative feeling. So have the conversation, check your bank account. You won't have to live in dread anymore. Do these things that you're worried about. Just have that mini confrontation and practice. So if you had any last advice for anybody who is in a relationship with a 7 or, a friendship, deep friendship, what would you tell them on how to be in a relationship with a 7?
Support their big ideas. Don't guilt trip them for wanting to do things, wanting to travel, wanting to go places, wanting to go to events. And just support them. And it's okay to like try to get them into that hard conversation too. Like just because they aren't initiating it doesn't mean you can't.
Right. Yeah. A 7 might not lead the conversation, but if coerced in a friendly, upbeat way, right? And the same thing with, their big ideas. If you are trying to rein in that glittery cloud, like, hey, come back to earth a little bit, do it in this positive, upbeat way where it's not just like, this is bad. This is bad. This is not going to work. You're doing this. because we liked that positive outlook. So give us that, like, this is not going to be that bad. And then kind of gently go into it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are really great advice for an Enneagram 7 and for somebody who is in a relationship with a 7. So once again, thank you for coming on the show. We get to live out our dreams of being on a podcast together.
Always fun.
That wraps up how to get along with an Enneagram 7. I hope it was helpful and gave you some insight into the mind of somebody who you love. To listen to the entire episode, along with more episodes on Enneagram 7s, hosted by a 7, check out my podcast, streaming on all major platforms. It's linked right in the bio. Be sure to send it to your favorite Enneagram 7 or to someone who you know is in a close relationship with one. And if you loved today's episode, please follow, subscribe, leave a review. It really does help the show grow so much and allows me to continue to get awesome guests and episodes out for you. And of course, if I could leave you with just one thing, it is this: expect good things always, and they will happen.